Okay. So we'll start with Mark. Is it Mark here?
Hi everyone, my name is Mark Nati, and for the purpose of today's discussion, if you like, I'm wearing two hats. So I'm representing both the UK and Hong Kong. So I was a senior lecturer in the UK at the University of the West of England, but in the last year I've moved to Hong Kong, and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of English at Lingnan University. So I'll be sharing experiences that cover the UK and Hong Kong.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Dr. McNulty. And we'll move on to Dr. Stephen Dadriglo.
Hello, everyone. Uh, Good to meet you all. My name is Stephen Dadzuglo, and I'm an assistant professor in the School of Journalism, Writing, and Media at the University of British Columbia here in Canada.
Thank you. Very first one. And then next one is Dr. Ruby Wadi.
Hello, everyone. Good to meet you. So my name is Ruby Wadie, and I am currently a teaching assistant professor in technical writing at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I teach technical communication, cultural rhetorics related topics, social justice, and professional writing. And so I will be representing the teaching focused, positions for this talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this. And then we have Dr. Maruf.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you guys. It's been a long time. We've had a chance to see ourselves. My name is Maruf, as rightly mentioned. I currently work at the Business College in a university called Sam Houston State University. I teach courses in business communication, design courses, and then introduction to business careers. These are the courses I teach. And sometimes I also get to teach courses relating to writing. So these are the things I do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now that we've heard from our candidates, we'll just straight away go into our questions. So um, let me share my screen and I'll ask the question at the same time while sharing the screen. So the question will be on the screen and listen to. And we'll go in the same direction. We'll start with Dr. Nate, then Dr. Dadublo, then Dr. Wadir, and then Maruf. We'll all each answer the respond to the questions in about 5 minutes, and we'll move on to the next question. So okay. Okay, so our first question is that from your experience in academia so far, on where you work, what makes a candidate stand out? And what advice would you?
Right. Thank you very much, Linford.
Okay,
So, as I
okay,
said, I was in the UK and I'm now in Hong Kong. So, in the UK, what they run by is like a lectureship position. So, they have typically a lecturer position, a senior lecturer position, an associate professor, and then a full professor. And then Hong Kong is similar to North America, where they have the tenure track system. So in both, contexts, so if I'm assuming that one is applying for a standard lectureship in the UK or a standard assistant professorship in Hong Kong, I'm going to list four things that, in my opinion, are essential, and I'm listing them in order of importance. So the first is a strong publication record. The second is relevant teaching experience evidenced by some form of student feedback scores or student, feedback surveys. The third is experience with writing grants or demonstrating the potential to secure grants. And then the fourth thing I would mention is evidence of collegiality. And this can include things like leadership, service, and administration. So these are the four things that I would list as most relevant to make any candidate competitive. Now, out of the four things that I've listed, the most essential is a strong publication record. And so that is what any candidate should prioritize. And then the other things can bolster the application further. So to give one a chance of being shortlisted for a lectureship or an assistant professorship in the UK or in Hong Kong, a strong publication record is quintessential. Without that, it's almost like a nil chance. All right. But having said that, that does not suffice because chances are you'll be competing with others who also have a strong publication record. And so other things become equally important. And that is where the teaching and the ability to write grants or evidence of collegiality becomes essential. But I'm going to place a strong publication record as the most important thing. So these are the four things I'll list. In terms of the second part of the question, what advice will I give to early career researchers or graduate students who are preparing to enter the market in these places? I'm going to split my advice into two. If a graduate does not have a strong publication record, I would advise that you don't apply to permanent lectureships or you don't apply for assistant professorships because I feel like you wouldn't be shortlisted. Of course, miracles do happen, and so you can work with that if you want to. But from a practical perspective or in terms of reality on the ground, if you don't have a strong publication record, I wouldn't advise you to start applying for permanent lectureships or assistant professorships. Instead, I would say maybe explore postdoc opportunities. Now, even with postdoc opportunities, they can also be equally competitive, where even for a postdoc, you'll still be required sometimes to demonstrate, a strong publication record. But because it's a postdoc, there are different types of postdoc, and sometimes you can get postdocs based on relationships, you can get postdocs based on your contacts, you can get postdocs based on, other means. And so if you don't have a strong publication record, I would say explore postdocs opportunities first or explore teaching positions and then use this 2-year or 3-year or 4-year period to build a strong publication record. All right, so that would be the advice I would give for those who don't have a strong publication record. However, if you have a strong publication record and you want to apply for permanent lectureships or assistant professorships, my advice is that in your application documents, position yourself as a fully fledged academic, not as a recently graduated PhD. So even though you may have recently graduated or you're an ABD or whatever it is, nobody cares about that. What they are looking for is a lecturer or an assistant professor. And so it is important for you to use your language both in your CV and in your cover letter or other documents to frame yourself as a fully fledged academic. And so I'll strongly advise against what some people call the small potato syndrome, where I don't know whether it's humility or some kind of modesty, maybe you want to sell yourself small, it doesn't work at all. You need to put your front foot forward. So if you have a strong publication record, if you think you are qualified for an AP position or a lectureship, then yeah, that's look the part. All right. So for such candidates, I think the key thing is not to shrink yourself or to, make yourself small. Just use your language to frame yourself as strongly, as you can. So that would be my response to the first question.
Yeah, that's very insightful. Thank you so much for that. So let's hear from Dr. Dadublo as well.
Yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, I'll add to some of the things that Mark has talked about. I will say to stand out in applications to job positions here in Canada, one of the topmost things I would say in my experience will be that you are framing yourself in a way in which your identity as a scholar or a teacher is very, very clear and consistent across all your documents. So that anyone who is reading your material would, by the time they've read your cover letter, your CV, research statements, your teaching statements, all documents, they should be able to tell that this candidate is a scholar of ABC. It is not quite clear because application documents application pools can be large, right? Sometimes you can get as many as 200 applicants for one job. I've seen that same experience here. So to stand out, it should be clear what your identity as a scholar is. And that identity should be consistent across all your documents. I'll say also that to stand out, you want to demonstrate some connection to the mission of the department. You can have a standard application or set of materials for your job in advance of going on the job market. But this goes without saying that tailoring those materials to the department is so essential. It will surprise you to see applications that it will be clear that this is quite generic, right? A lot of work has gone into it, but it is generic because it doesn't connect to the mission or the focus of the department. So if you are, say, in technical communication and the department isn't quite focused on technical communication and you still decide to apply, you want to connect to your research in a way that is resonant for folks in the department. And that is potentially something that makes you stand out. That also then means that research in the department is crucial. Research in the department in terms of the research focus of faculty, course descriptions, initiatives in the department, something that a lot of folks will then, that you're a good fit. How you're a good fit, you are demonstrating that in a way that shows that you stand out of the pack. So that's one other dimension to standing out in an application pack. Now, finally, for folks going on the job market, I would say to research the genre of the different sets of documents you're going to submit. Mm-hmm. So a cover letter for, say, a teaching position in Canada here as well, there are typically, I would even say, 3 tracks rather than 2. So lecturer positions that then go on to sessional lecturer positions, that go on to senior lecturer, and that's just about it for one track. Tenure track positions in some universities in Canada are 2. There are teaching focused tenure track positions. So you might see, say, assistant professor of teaching, which is quite, I must say, distinct from assistant teaching professor. So assistant professor of teaching is a tenure track position. And then an assistant professor position, which is a research track position. So if you are applying to any of these, you want to research the genre that aligns with the focus of that application. So if this is a research focused position, you know how to prioritize research in your documents. If this is a teaching focused position, you want to prioritize teaching in those documents, which means that relying on successful samples of these documents from folks who have tested their documents by getting jobs would be a very would be a good thing to do, essentially.
Okay, thank you so much, Kian. So can we hear also now from Dr. Wadier?
Okay. So the first thing that I'm going to add so again, I'll be talking for teaching focused positions, and I'm going on what Dr. Dadiblo just mentioned with regard to, researching genre and understanding, identity and all that. I would say the first is if you want to go into teaching positions, maybe that's what you want to focus on for the rest of your life, or because you love teaching so much, or you want to begin with teaching, like Mark was saying earlier, and then build your research portfolio before you go into tenure track, the first thing you want to do is to, sorry, learn the different names for, the teaching positions. As Dr. Dadublo was saying, sometimes it's referred to as assistant teaching professor. At UNC, they refer to it as teaching assistant professor. And most universities will also refer to it as lecturer. So the job titles will come with, these variations. So it's good to know, so you know that you're applying for the right, position that you're looking for. And then now moving into the specific things to make you stand out, I did put a few things down, and I can share it, later after the webinar. But the first thing is, for this position, your teaching is the main component of your portfolio. So your teaching is, more like your research portfolio. And most of the time, they would give you like an 80-20, ratio. They can spell this out in the offer letter. Sometimes they won't, but you have to ask. So it means your teaching, you'll be assessed and promoted based on 80% teaching and 20% service. Sometimes they can divide the 20% and say 10% research and 10% service. Sometimes they won't specify, but your teaching is mainly your portfolio. So what it means is that you want to first develop a strong teaching portfolio in a specific area, and there, as has been said already, what's your teaching identity? So, are you a tech com, person? Are you a digital, composition person? Are you a cultural rhetorics, person? Are you a social justice, person in terms of, your teaching? And so that's the first thing you want to do. And to really help with this, it's good to really look at, these job ads and look at, what is the trend in terms of, what the job ads are looking for these days. And that can help you to carve your teaching identity. So that's one. The second thing is also that in line with developing a strong teaching portfolio, they are looking for teaching in a wide range of courses and in different formats. So as you are developing your teaching portfolio, think about ways that you can teach courses besides the general first year composition. As graduate students, this is what we usually teach. And I'll talk about some tips to help you, do these kinds of things. But they are looking for teaching experience in a wide range of courses and also in different formats, hybrid, online, what have you. The third is that they also want evidence of intentional teaching. So this means that you are not just teaching, the course syllabi that they give you in grad school, but how do you, design your own course? How do you, have you come up with innovative, assignments in relation to your research interest, or how have you maybe adjusted some of the things that you were given as a graduate student to show that you were really intentional in the kinds of things that you teach. So that's the third. The fourth is that, and this is really very important, I put it as a fourth because it's not as important, but I think is important, because it helps to really stand out. We are talking about standing out. So that is, you want to make sure you have a second area of teaching. So what do I mean by that? You may be a TechCom person or, TechCom professional communication courses. So you're teaching TechCom courses, you're teaching business writing, but it's always helpful to really have like a second, teaching area. It could be digital composition. It could be, cultural rhetorics or intercultural communication, or it could be, other things that relate to your research, because you realize that when you are hired as a teaching professor, you teach more courses, courses that are not, sometimes you don't even teach composition courses at all. They are looking for ways that you can help, strengthen their different units. And so sometimes it can help if you have, a second area of teaching interest, and when they are talking with you in the interview, they realize that this person is really somebody that has, can really help us build our program. Not just writing studies, but other sub-programs like maybe their business communication certificate course or maybe a grant writing certification course. So you want to make sure that you develop a second area to really, let them see that you can teach a lot of courses at the end of the day. And then I have a fifth point, which it can be tricky, but it's also very helpful. And this is really having an administrative experience or, a committee work or, professional development experience that is not teaching. And I know this can be difficult as graduate students when, there aren't a lot of things for you to do aside teaching, first year writing. But I remember in my case, UTEP had a position for graduate students that was, helping to manage the graduate program, the graduate rhetoric and composition program, along with the director. And so this was, I think it was called assistant director of the graduate program. And I was able to get into it my last year of grad school. And I think this was very, very helpful, when I was preparing my job application document. So, try to get into administrative positions if you can. And then the last but one point is research publication is a great addition. Most of the time, it is not required. They don't even ask you. In my experience, there was only one question on, your research interest, and that was, how does it inform your teaching? So having research publication is a great addition, but I don't want to say, it's a must because in my case, that wasn't the experience, but they want to see how you are involved in research and how that informs, your teaching pedagogy because, it's a teaching, focused job. So at the end of the day, your research still comes in and it's good to show that. And then the very last one is you want to make sure that you have strong teaching evaluations and observation. Sometimes we ignore this as graduate teaching assistants, but it's very, very important. So one thing you can do is that at the end of your courses, you are putting the work into it. You're a great teacher and all that. And to build your, job market portfolio at the end of your courses, you can actually have students, small incentive, maybe 3 points if you complete the course evaluation, for me and, make sure that you are specific. I don't want to see your evaluation. I just want to see the submission notification that you have completed it because, that can really help to boost your job application materials if you are able to, copy some of these very good evaluations and add them to your application packet. So I know it's a lot. Like I said, I made points, jotted some notes, and I can share it later. But this is what I want to share on this question. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. And then we now move to Maruf.
All right. I think just want to piggyback on what Steve and then Ruby mentioned, but I would focus on some specifics. As Ruby mentioned, when it is teaching focus, you may want to kind of construct an identity that would tell your reviewers that, okay, this is someone who has so much experience in teaching. But here is where the rubber meets the road. Most of the time, because we are grad students or maybe advanced level people, we juggle with a lot of language. So we tend to write more of like abstract, things. So when the reviewer is reviewing, they don't kind of see the imagery of your good teaching skills or whatever skills you can bring to bear in the classroom. So in your cover letter, if you could give concrete instances where you have kind of like impacted, students in such a way that it has even like kind of maybe increase grades or like increase, student engagement in the classroom, also like highlight that. So I was told that it's very, very difficult to know a bad teacher. Very, very difficult. But it's very, very, very easy to know a good researcher. So the only way you could position yourself as a good teacher is to give them the evidence. So the evidence is how you kind of show instances and how you kind of like demonstrate through examples what you've been doing and what you can do. And regarding the teaching evaluation, Ruby mentioned, I think our grad students in the past, maybe we don't think that those teaching evaluations are very, very important. But when you are dealing with a teaching intensive position, even if it is a tenure track position, there are people out there who are very, very interested in teaching. So when they review your application, their focus is on teaching. And interestingly, I have seen that people do not like research. So when they see you position yourself as a researcher, they get very angry. So you have to be able to marry the two. Just make sure that you synergize the two, especially if it is a tenure track position. But in a situation where it's just teaching focus, make sure you kind of align your identity as a teacher. And the other one that I want to piggyback, I think Steve said that in a passing. When it comes to research, aligning your research with the department, you need to be able to kind of figure out, okay, this person I know in this department researches this. Make sure you position yourself as a collaborator so that they see you as someone, okay, when you join the department, you can do some research collaboration. Because in the academy, collaboration is it's a very valuable, skill to have. So if you know the departments, position yourself as someone who can engage in collaboration, who would be willing to do collaborative, works with folks in the department. And then the last thing I will mention is so some of the universities here, we have a very strict, demarcation, R1, R2, even within the R1 and R2, they say monkeys play by sizes. Now, there are some of the schools, I think let's say if you applied an R1 university, mostly those are very research intensive. Now, if it is a tenure track position, make sure your identity as a researcher is very, very, very clear. Because R1, if it is a tenure track position, predominantly your output is weighed on research, and teaching is just a small component of it. So if you are going into an R1 university and the department is seeking a tenure track position, you make sure you position yourself as a researcher. But when you are dealing with an R2 university where they mix both teaching and then research, you have to align yourself with both. So you are a good teacher and then you are a good researcher. And that would have to be very, very, very clear. Now, the last one I mentioned is publication. That is the most tricky aspect of applying for a tenure track position. There are people who apply jobs, tenure track position, they don't even have a single publication. If you could, one thing you should show in your cover letter, if you don't have a publication, in your CV, if you don't have a publication, make sure they see you prepare some manuscripts. So you have to put in your cover letter explaining that these are the manuscripts I'm working. So manuscripts under progress, or maybe manuscripts under preparation. Then you highlight that in your CV and then your cover letter. Now, I also realized that with the cover letter, a lot more folks, they read it very well more than the other documents. That's what I've realized. Except that some folks, they may want to read your teaching statement, your research, statement later, but the cover letter is the first interface. They kind of try to see who you are. So do not toy with the cover letter. Make sure you do a lot of work there and you front load a lot of good things in your cover letter. And mostly they just use like 5 minutes just to glance through it. And sometimes it's just like a scan or something. So do a lot of work there. Make sure you front load a lot of things in the cover letter. Then the other ones, because they are more like they are more of essays, right? You need more time to kind of like develop them very well. But across my experience, what I've realized is that every faculty who reviews an application, they have an interest. Either like they are more interested in your teaching statement, or they are more interested in your maybe student evaluation, or they are more interested in or your CV, right? So make sure all the documents you submit, they are very, very strong. Do not take them for granted. So do a lot of work and make sure that all the things you have, they are very, very, very strong. And the last thing is give it out to a faculty member to review and give you feedback. And people who are already in the job market as colleagues, do talk to them. They may have some inputs for you before you send them out. So that's these are some of the things I wanted to piggyback on Ruby and then Steve.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for the first round of responses, and we are delighted about what we're hearing. And I believe that I've seen some comments and then questions in the listing. And when we get to Q&A, we might come back to some of these things. But for now, let's go to the second question, which we might not spend so much time here. I want you to be more precise here. So here we're looking at how overwhelming the interview process could be. So what should we have in mind when we get an interview? And if we are lucky to have an offer, what do you do before you accept or negotiate, or how do you negotiate? So also we'll go back to the same order. We'll start with Dr. Nate.
Right. So, for a standard academic post in the UK or in Hong Kong, typically in terms of structure for interviews, two main things, happen, even though it may vary from university to university. But typically there is what you call an initial interview and then a campus visit for those who are shortlisted after the initial interview. So in terms of structure, typically that's what happens. It's an initial interview. You just meet a panel, and then the interview takes place, and then those who are shortlisted, maybe two or three people, they do what they call a campus visit, or these days, an online visit. And in our online visits or campus visits, there's a brief meeting with the head of department. Then there is a job talk or sometimes a teaching demo, depending on what the school wants to do. And then sometimes there could be a brief meeting with the dean as well. So that is in terms of the structure, in terms of familiarizing yourself with what to expect. As far as preparation is concerned, I'll highlight two main things. The first thing I'll say is researching the department in order to reflect on how you can position yourself as the right fit. Now, this term right fit, it's bandied around a lot. That is what is almost always used to eliminate people. Eventually, when you don't get the job, more often than not, they'll say, oh, we found a better fit. And it's a very subjective thing. It's very difficult to actually understand what that means. But it is good to reflect on it. It could mean different things. It could be maybe a cultural thing or something to do with values or something to do with research program in the department. It could be several things. But I think what you can do is to at least reflect on how you can position yourself as the right fit. You can do some research in order to prepare how to articulate whatever that fit, could be. It may work, it may not work, but I think if you don't reflect on that at all, that would be, a bit, disappointing. So that would be my first advice in terms of preparation, reflecting on how you can position yourself as the right fit. And then the second thing I would add is highlighting or foregrounding what you are going to bring on board, what contributions you think you're going to make to the teaching or the research program in the department. So don't focus too much on what you think you're going to get from the institution or what you're going to gain, unless, well, perhaps you are asked. But I think focus more on how you are going to advance their program or how you are going to further strengthen their already strong program. So I'll say foreground your contributions to their research program or to their teaching program. So that's in terms of preparing for the interview. Now, when it comes to offer, so if you get an offer, I mean that's wonderful. The first thing I'll say is don't be in a haste to respond. So typically when you receive an offer, there is a deadline. It will say, oh, you need to get back to us by so and so, time. Well, that is great. So I guess just be calm about it. Of course, you are happy, you're excited, that there is no need to respond immediately or respond the next day. Just let it simmer, just be calm about it and get back to them, in good time. Even if you get back to them after the deadline, in my experience, no problems with that because once you have the offer, they don't make two people the offer. The offer just goes to one person. So once the offer is with you, well, the offer is with you until you say something about it. So you're not losing that offer. The offer is not going anywhere. So I'll say don't be in a rush at all. Just be calm about it. And while you reflect on the offer, so you read the offer in detail, if you have a mentor or a trusted person, someone who can help you negotiate, you can have an interaction with this person, show them the offer, and then that person can help you with drafting some kind of negotiation, if you like, letter. So you should always negotiate because you are expected to negotiate. There is no way you're going to lose the offer because you negotiated. It's not going to happen. So you should always negotiate. And in doing that, since you don't have any experience in doing that, if you can get a trusted person, emphasis on a trusted person or a mentor to guide you with that, that would be very useful. What I'll say generally, as far as negotiation is concerned, or before you put pen to paper, I'm gonna just list some things that are worth considering, things that you can talk about. So you can ask about things like having clarity on your teaching load. Okay, so it is a standard academic post, what they call maybe 40-40-20, 40% teaching, 40% research, maybe 20% service. Typically, that's how it works. So it's good to get clarity on your standard teaching load, per semester. Is it one module per term or it's two modules? So get clarity on the standard teaching load. You can also ask about any startup grant. So most universities give that. If you are coming in for the first time, they give you an X amount of money, what they call a startup grant. Is that startup grant something you have to apply for, or it is standard you are giving because you've gotten the job? So you can ask about that as part of your negotiations. You can also ask about conference funds, what the resources are and how that works. So get some information on uh, conference funds. If there's an issue of relocation because you're applying for the job in a different country or in a different city, you ask about relocation, allowance and visa issues. If you have a family and you have children, ask about things to do with child welfare and education and things like that. And then the final thing I have here, visa applications, etc. So any other thing that comes into your mind, ask about it. As I said, the offer is not going anywhere. The offer is with you. So don't hesitate to ask any question you want to ask before you make a final, decision. And so I just want you to see yourself as being in some kind of a position of strength because once you sign something and you start the job, you can't really change anything again. So this moment, this negotiation period is the only time that you have a chance to bargain or engage in some kind of interaction with them on that kind of level. Chances are you may not get a lot of the things you ask for, but it is still worth asking, or you won't get exactly what you are looking for. But if you don't ask, you don't get anything at all. So it is worth, listing specific things down, looking at your peculiar situation as well. Even though I've mentioned some generic things, but you must understand your own peculiar situation and then be reasonable about things you want to, engage them on. And I want to stress that you're not going to lose the job because you negotiate. The worst that can happen is they'll say, oh, no, we can't give you this. So will you still take the offer? And then you can say, okay, well, I'm taking it or I'm not taking it. So by all means, negotiate to whatever extent you want to. And then once they've given you the answers and you find them satisfying or not, you can then make an informed decision on whether to accept or not.
Okay. That's a lot. Thank you. So we'll move to Dr. Dadublo to build on briefly this.
Yeah, I'll add just a few things because it seems a number of the points I do have here have already been articulated. I would say in terms of the interview and preparing for the interview, um, you want to be as specific in responses as much as possible. The more specific, the more memorable. It's important that you brainstorm ahead of time specific instances from your teaching, from your research, from your service that you can use as examples in answering these questions during interviews. That will mean ideas first and then examples later. In other words, don't bury the lead, right? Very often, you can tell a story. You have a question, you tell a story for 2 minutes. People want to, okay, what exactly are you getting at? And I would say part of this is also somewhat cultural, particularly for those of us coming from places like Ghana, where you ask someone a question, they talk for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and then the very important aspect of that answer comes at the very end, right? This is not an evaluation of rightness or wrongness, right? But in my experience, the idea is that whatever it is that you want to communicate, you want that to be the lead. And then examples can follow. And with examples following, that means very specific, people are able to tell very quickly if your responses are quite generic. So if there's a question about research or a question about teaching, what specifically from your own practice are you bringing on board? And that only comes when there is a lot of prior preparation, where you have brainstormed ideas to bring to these conversations. That also means I would emphasize this again, that research in the school, whether teaching focused, research focused, or a combination of this, research in the school is very, very important, so that again, your identity as a scholar or a teacher is front loaded in all your responses, so that it's clear there are people who someone might want to apply to jobs in community colleges, and then constantly it's not quite clear whether in your responses whether you are a teacher at heart or you're a scholar, right? When the focus of community colleges is teaching. So although you might decide from the very beginning that you apply to a wide range of jobs, teaching jobs, research jobs, you want your answers in these interviews to be tailored to the kind of job it is you are interviewing for. When it comes to negotiations, I will say to prioritize. There are a million things you can always negotiate for. Mark has already talked about a number of these. But to prioritize in terms of what is most important to you. If a base salary is the most important thing to you, because again, if you have a startup grant, you have, say, moving costs, you have conference funding, you have base salary. What in all of these are you prioritizing? Because again, you can negotiate everything, or you can't negotiate everything in a very significant way. So if you feel, well, you can still get funding from the university for conferences, then it might not be a good idea to negotiate for so much more for conferences as a startup, right? If you realize, well, getting one teaching or course release the first 2 years, one per term is going to be useful for you, that is something to negotiate. But it's always important to actually to prioritize these before you actually start out with your negotiation. I'll say also that negotiating through writing might be the best bet, starting out, because you can be easily flawed. You're excited, like Mark said. So it's starting out, oh, let's have a conversation. You can definitely have a conversation, but you want to be very clear that while you put forward your negotiation through writing. And that way, you can have that clarity to think through different aspects of your offer in order to negotiate them. In doing that again, increasingly I see that for some states, provinces, there might be there are clear policies about stating the range for salaries. If that is not stated on the job offer, then you want to research that. And there are several ways to do that. If it is a public institution, most public institutions by law would have faculty salaries published. And so you want to be able to research that. You can reach out to human resources. Most schools are okay sharing that kind of information, although, in aggregated form. So to give you an idea how much, ballpark folks and you want to consult databases like that. You also want to consult mentors because, if you're particularly coming out of grad school where you earn a pittance and then suddenly you are made an offer that is 2-3 times more, you might think, oh, this is great, right? But you probably also are worth much more than you are being offered. And so you always, no matter how really good it seems, the folks want you as much as you want them. And so you want to be able to negotiate those, consulting mentors, consulting databases, and putting forward a strong negotiation.
Oh, wonderful insights. We'll pivot to Dr. Wadi at this point.
Okay, so a couple of things to add here. The first thing I'll say is that so now you've been invited for an interview. I think in my experience, it's good to go into the interview with focusing now more on what you are going to contribute, to the department, as have been said already. They've read your materials, they've seen all your wonderful teaching experiences and all. It's not a time for you to talk a lot about, I've done this, I've done that. But now, one thing you can do is to read through the number of courses, the types of courses they offer specifically for the subunits. I say subunits because most of the time when these teaching calls come, they are focusing on maybe, we are looking for somebody who can teach technical communication and digital. And so focusing on that part of the program, or, if it's cultural rhetorics, you focus on the courses offered under that part of the program. So go to, whatever focus that, you have been, they are wanting to bring you in. Look at the courses they offer and try to answer the interview questions, try tailoring what your experiences and what you plan to do, based on those courses. So for example, I remember in my case, one thing I talked about is, I've seen that you offer this course, it's very interesting to me. This is how I've taught a similar, in this place and that place, and this is how I plan to, maybe adjust or add this. And then you can ask, I remember I was asking something about if they have opportunities for, collaborating with organizations around and all that. So in the interview, let it be less of yourself and more of what they do and how you can contribute to it. They will see that you have done the research that Mark talked about, and also that you are interested in the program, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing that you want to do is also that you want to really know your teaching, almost like you want to know it by heart, just like your research. You have your research page. I do this and that, and then, and I say this because it actually took me by surprise. So there I was in an interview, and then there was a question that says, okay, so it's the middle of the semester, you are teaching this particular course. What are you going to be teaching this particular week? It's like, oh wow. What kind of question is this? But I realized what they wanted to know is, your courses, just like that, and even though it was a general first year courses, I said, okay, in the middle, probably will be on the second units, of the course syllabus, is going to be this project, and, I'll be teaching this, and students and I will be talking about this in the classroom. And again, I realized that it wasn't really about, what do you want to say? But they want to know that the courses you teach, because you are a teaching professor. And then the third thing that I want to say is that, and this will be in terms of, negotiating. So I realized that I was applying to private institutions and government institutions. I realized that for teaching focused, the government institutions were not willing to, negotiate compared to the private institutions. I remember one of the private institution, I think in fact it was the only, private school I had applied. And so the final stage was, inviting me for the teaching demo, and it was me and one other person. And before then, the department chair had called me and, said, you are inviting you in, blah, blah, blah. This is the pay, it's going to be high, this, you can negotiate, but we won't go beyond this. I was like, oh, meanwhile, the governments, university that had reached out that they like me, they want to give me an offer, said, the pay is non-negotiable, so I don't have a lot of things to say in terms of negotiating for, in my case, because of my experience. I did end up going with the, government as UNC, even though the pay was low, but I realized that they have opportunities to, increase your pay. And that's my second point, that in terms of questions to ask in the interview, you can ask, how can you, what's their promotion like? Because I realized also that most of these teaching positions are very vague on the promotion. So thankfully UNC has, this tier where it's teaching assistant professor, teaching associate professor, and then full professor, and then your pay increases with that. But also, I realized that there are some things that you can do, very, very little things you can do to, ask for, pay raise, before you get promoted and things like that. And so that's something you can ask. Yes, you are not willing to negotiate, but what are some things that, teaching professors can do to ask for a raise or things like that? By all means, ask, that, like, all the panelists have said. So, yeah, this is what I'll add to it. Thank you.
And thank you. And with that, we pivot to um, Dr. Maruf.
All right. I think I will go into the specifics, starting with Steve. I think with interviews, if you do not have a lot of experience in interviews, please try to get some mock interviews before you start doing your interviews. Because a lot of times when you are used to something, it gives you some level of confidence. But if you're not used to something, it's kind of creates some sort of anxiety in you. No matter how good you are, when you get into the interview room, you see that a lot of things go wrong. So I know some schools, they have mock interviews for their students. And when you also go to the career services center of your school, you can request someone to kind of do some mock interviews with you. That's number one. And number two, they are kind of interview sessions that maybe they look very, very challenging, especially a question that is more behavioral. A behavioral question can be very, very challenging. So you may want to look at what are some of the behavioral questions that you may struggle with. Then you try to practice those behavioral questions. For example, if you are given a scenario where maybe you are teaching and you have a disruptive student, how do you handle it? How do you handle it? Right. Or maybe a student complain about their grade. How do you handle it? These are behavioral questions, right? Or maybe you are teaching and there's a concept that students don't really get, don't really understand. How do you kind of like unpack those concepts that students are able to understand you? So these are behavioral questions. And these behavioral questions, sometimes they are very challenging. And they become less challenging if you have if you have prior experience and you have a lot of talking points and examples to give. But if you don't have, mostly you have very little to say. So what I mostly recommend when it comes to interviews, try to know what the industry popularly call, I think they call it the STAR method. So the STAR method, when you are asked about a scenario, now think about the situation. What was the situation? Then in that situation, what was the task? The task you were supposed to do? How did you do it? And what action did you take? And then what was the result? So now when you do that, piggybacking on Steve's point, you'll not be doing what we call beating around the bush or whatever, right? Because it's kind of going to be structured where we leave the most important points at the end. No, you have to front load your argument. First and foremost, front load your argument. So that's where I recommend that Barbara Minto has a very interesting model in terms of how you structure an information. And this is very, very common in interviews. So when you are asked a question, start with your main point. What takeaway message do you want your audience to have? Start with it. So it's just like maybe call it a topic sentence, right? If you ask, what is your name? My name is Maruf, full stop. Then you now go ahead and then continue, right? Now, when you have your main point, then the next thing is to front load your key arguments. After your main point, you move to your key arguments. So your key arguments would be a build up on your main point. Now, after your key arguments, then you now go on to your supporting details. So this is where you bring in the supporting details so that you don't talk anyhow, like you don't talk in a very unstructured way. Now, when you do that, your interviewers would have a lot of information to go with, right? So this what I recommend when it comes to interviews. And the other thing has to do with sometimes a lot of things happen in interviews, especially when it comes to certain topics like gender, like diversity, like inclusion. They may ask you questions about those things. You have to research about some of these things and do not press the hot buttons. Right. Do not press the hot buttons. The moment you press the hot buttons, then you just get yourself out. And there are some topics, they are more or less like booby traps. So you have to strategically position yourself in such a way that you don't create an impression about maybe something, right? They are just traps that the other person want to know how you think about something. And you can research about some of these things, then you don't get yourself into those booby traps. And when it comes to negotiation, generally, I prefer when I am giving the offer, the first thing I would want to do if I want to negotiate, I ask, is the salary negotiable? Right. Is it negotiable? Right. If they say yes, then that's when you kickstart the negotiation. As Steve mentioned, it's very good to do it in writing. Right. In writing, maybe you might not slip. You might not like if you speak, you easily slip than when you write. Maybe when you write, you take your time to write very well. Right. And whenever you are requesting some adjustments, you have to be very, very reasonable so that the person you are dealing with maybe you may want to send an impression that you are more interested in the job than money, but you are also more interested in ensuring that they pay you based on the skill set you bring to the department or you bring to the table. So you have to be able to kind of like know some of these things. And then the other one, especially in the US at this time, when you receive an offer, one of the most important things you may want to do is to talk about your visa sponsorship. If you don't have a green card and if you're not a citizen, right? Talk about it. Make sure you have it in writing. All the negotiation you do, make sure it's in writing where you can trace it through an email, right? So that in future, in case something comes up, there's an evidence. Do not take someone's word of mouth. Get it in writing via an email or via a letter where you have like a concrete, document where maybe in future you could make a reference to. Because I know a situation where someone was like something was said through the word of mouth, and the next time the person said no, they didn't say that. So get it in writing, especially if it is an email. You can trace it anytime. Then at the end of the day, if something comes up, there's an evidence that, okay, this is it. And at the end of the day, you can stand on that. And especially in case any legal issue comes up, that is the only thing that might, save you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. We are about exactly an hour from the start of the program, and we'll have our last round of questions, which we may be brief, and then we'll go to the Q&A and listen to what our audience have to say, contribute, and ask. So let's do this final round of questions. And this has to do with specifically to where you are. So we want you to say something about your geographic location or specific to probably your area of interest or in terms of expectations. We've said some of these things, but we want you to um, wrap it up for us in terms of the expectations, in terms of culture and how the place is like. So we are asking that every academic job market has its own expectations and culture. So what are some of the things applicants should know about the job market in your country, in your region, in your school, or in your field as they begin their application and career?
All right. So for the UK, maybe I would start me maybe on a not so positive note, on a not so positive note. So generally, in terms of the academic landscape in the UK, especially for the humanities, the situation is maybe far from ideal. If I have to put it mildly, there's a bit of volatility. There's a bit of, I don't know, funding issues. So generally, I mean, I have to be honest with anyone looking for jobs in the UK is extremely hard because there are a lot of cuts and voluntary severances and there are real issues on the ground. That's not to discourage anybody, but I think it's good to be aware of that the current market in the UK is not as it used to be. It's not as maybe flourishing and thriving, as it used to be. So it's definitely useful, to have that at the back of, one's mind. But in terms of the actual system, if you get into the system, I would describe the system as a pretty flexible system. So if you're an academic in the UK, it doesn't feel to me like a pressurized system. I feel there's a lot of freedom and flexibility to do, what you want to do. So that is actually, a very good thing. So you're able to maybe manage your time, more efficiently because, as I said, after the workload is not, skyrocketing or anything like that. And in terms of working online and working from home, there's a bit of flexibility with that. And I would even say the expectations are not maybe extremely high. I feel like the expectations are measured. So generally, if you are in the UK system, I would call it a very flexible system, you know. So that's my maybe cultural information on the UK. Hong Kong, maybe I'll say is the opposite. So I'll say Hong Kong maybe intense, fiercely competitive, maybe highly pressurized, expectations super high, very, very competitive, demands, very high, as well. So if you are looking at, Hong Kong, then you should ideally be one who thrives, with pressurized environments or one, who is okay with, certain high demands and, high expectations. So generally, I'll say in that kind of context, maybe resilience and, be able to persevere and, um, being gritty and tenacious, all of those, attributes, become extremely important. So that is maybe how I'm going to classify the two places. I think maybe they're opposites, whereas the UK is a bit more, flexible, a bit more laid back. Hong Kong is a bit more maybe intense and a bit more competitive. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for highlighting this contrast between Hong Kong and UK. Let's invite Dr. Daduglo to this conversation.
Yeah, I will say that for Canada, the interview culture is quite similar to what you'll find in the US, with an important distinction. My experience with first round interviews here was that although Canadians are noted to be very polite people, the first round interviews were very impersonable, right? There was no, it felt almost very much detached. Now, I'll preface this also by saying that this is just one experience, but for what it is worth, in comparison to interviews that I've had in the US, where a lot can proceed in very personable, ways. It seems almost laid back, particularly for Zoom interviews. The opposite was the case for Canada. But then, and that is for long listing, right? So Canada has long list and then short list. Long list being for the first round interviews, short list being for campus visits. The campus visits were the opposite. People were a lot more personable, convivial. They seem very much interested in you as a person beyond your research, your teaching, and all the other reasons for which you are applying for the job. And so that is one thing to bear in mind. I would say also that showing enthusiasm within particularly the Canadian context is very much valued. Your research can be rock solid, teaching is innovative, but then when it doesn't come across, or you don't come across as someone enthusiastic of the position itself, and I guess this can be true of a lot of other places, but very much so here, it might seem as though, okay, well, would this person really be a good fit here? So to show enthusiasm, even if by nature you are not the kind to demonstrate so much enthusiasm about something, that is something that is culturally valued here, that one might want to take into account. So as a general rule, for me, what one has to keep in mind is to adjust to the prevailing norm of things, right? So the tone of the committee, yes, you want to, if the committee seems very much, laid back, you don't want to seem, as detached. You want to actually read the room, and then connect with the committee in that way. The academic norms generally in Canada are not, if you train, for instance, in the US, the academic norms here are not as different. In fact, faculty move, across both countries all the time, and so whatever preparations you might already have in mind for the US sometimes can apply here. Finally, for Canadian jobs, by policy, you would find that there's one line that comes almost always at the very end, that all applicants are encouraged to apply. However, Canadians and permanent residents will be given priority. Now, that is by policy, by law, supposed to be there, but that shouldn't be a discouragement if you are not a Canadian permanent resident or a citizen. My experience is if you are the best candidate, there is a path, for you as an international, scholar coming in. And so don't automatically, take the back seat once you see, such a description on a job ad.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you for being brief. And so let's invite Dr. Wadie.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. So I want to build on what Dr. Dadiblo said about interviews, interview culture. One thing that I want to add to that is when you're going into the interview, it's good to really balance, that being yourself or being personable and also being serious and enthused about, what you teach. In my experience, I realized that there were two particular interviews that I enjoyed, and those were the two places that I ended up getting, an offer or, possible offer from. And it was because I remember the interviews where, it was really conversational. One of them in particular was interesting because they had like about 5 or 6 people and questions here and there, and it felt like, oh wow, this thing is very serious. I thought they said teaching positions are not, as high pressure, but I remember like the conversation was very it was very conversation. I don't know if it was the questions they asked or how I answered or but I think it was just a combination. So just it's serious. Once you have planned, you have prepared, just go in, being conversational, being ready to talk. If there's a question you can't answer, say, just like we teach people with, mock interviews. I also teach business communication, like Maruf was saying, pause, take a moment, recollect and then come back and say, this is how I would answer it. When you finish answering, you can say, I'm not sure if it's, what you were hoping for, but I can, answer further. Just go in being, because at the end of the day, they want somebody they can work with. Not somebody posing as, this and all that. So that's the first thing. And then in terms of, other things I want to share, I like to say that, with teaching positions, know that it's contract based. Know that it's contract based. Some contracts will start with 1 year because they want to, assess you. And then after that, it's like with every 3 years. Recently, UNC changed theirs to every 5 years because, I'm in a teaching committee. I said 3 years is too short. So we were able to get that to 5 years. But yes, it's contract based and it's renewable. People ask, are you going to be sacked if, I have not had that experience. Colleagues I know in teaching positions haven't had that experience. Um, you know, but people say, well, it's like you don't know if, but I don't even think about that. So that's one thing to know. The second thing is also be prepared for the workload. It's a lot of teaching, because that's what you were brought in for. And I say this because if you are planning to go into research, building your research portfolio while in the teaching position, then you want to really carve out time to help you do that research work. It's very, very important. So that's something that you want to try and balance. And something to ask in the interviews to ask them if they have opportunities or benefits for research if you are looking towards going into research position in the future, because then that they have money that can cover conferences and things like that, to really help you further your research publication goals and all that. And then the final thing I want to say is, just like Mark was saying with the UK, is very flexible. There's a lot of freedom, less pressure, no research expectations. Of course, the salary is not competitive in most, especially for, the government institutions. But once you get in, talk to people, ask around about what you can do to get promoted and have a pay raise, because then that can help you to get the kind of pay you want to get. And I for instance, I know someone that so I was hired in 2020. He came in 2021. In fact, I was part of the committee that hired him. And as a last year, I think, yeah, last year, he had already been promoted to associate professor. because he was asking questions and doing the kinds of things he needed to do, which is very quick compared to, when teaching professors come in and how they move, through the ranks. So it's very possible, but ask questions and begin doing the kinds of things you do to get to where you want to be in terms of, salary. And let's see. Yep, I believe that is all. Oh, yes. You also want to make sure that, let's see. No, I think I've covered it. Workload. Yes. Okay. So that's all. Thank you.
And thank you. So can we hear last um, speaker, Dr. Maruf?
All right. I think for me, I want to highlight some experiences I kind of like had when I was in the job market. So I realized that um, depending on the school, a lot of things are just kind of very different. So when it comes to private institutions, I think the expectation and culture looks completely different from a federal funded universities. So you would expect to see that some of the private institutions, they kind of have a different benchmark, and you could see some evidence of rigor, right? Some evidence of rigor. So if you see evidence of rigor, now you need to position yourself to kind of like demonstrate that, okay, you are also somebody who could do something like that, right? So there was one school I visited, and I realized that the entire faculty, they all come from elite universities. The entire faculty, they all come from elite universities. And I think only one or two came from federal funded like universities. So the questions they were asking, the kind of culture they were anticipating looks more elite, like it looks more elite. So if that happens, then you need to position yourself in such a way that they see you as someone they can work with. Unlike a situation where they see you as someone that they couldn't work with, and that would not help your application. So mostly try to research about the university and then know their faculty. And then another thing has to do with when you are interviewing, I think they want to know, beyond just wanting the job, do you really know their faculty? Do you really know their faculty? Because if you do not know their faculty, chances are that you wouldn't know their culture and then their expectation. So I remember in one of my interviews, there was a scholar that I cited, and that scholar, fortunately, she happens to be in the interview, and she told me that I was the one you cited when you were talking about this, about that. But I didn't know that was her last name. So I just know that, okay, this is someone. And that kind of like strike a kind of relationship with us. So they want to see that, okay, do you really know us? Now, if you do not know us, then how do you work with us? So part of their expectation is they want to know you beyond just the fact that you are interested in the job, right? Yeah, they want to be able to like connect with you. Then the other thing I would encourage people to like to know is I think we sometimes get bogged down by our academic work, so we don't get to learn a lot of things. Right. So there are many instances you see that the faculty, they want something beyond just teaching, right? So they want someone who is a very good conversationalist. So you need to be able to know, okay, these are the expectations. Now, if I'm a very good conversationalist, then when I engage, I can. So they want to be able to connect with someone just beyond professionalism. They want to be able to know you in person. So these are some of the things I have observed. But when you also get a job, the expectation is kind of different. After you get a job and after you start to work, the expectation is also very different. And that's when you get to see a lot of the politics and a lot of the things that nobody taught you back in grad school. Nobody bothered to tell you about it. Then now you begin to see, those things, but you are just limited to certain apparent things. But later when you get a job, the ball would change the goalpost. And at the end of the day, it's just going to be a different ballgame. So you keep learning and learning till maybe from your early career, then you become a well-established scholar, then you are able to navigate some of these challenges. I think that's just a brief thing I would say on this.
Well, thank you. And thank you to all four of you for this wonderful experience sharing. We've heard some really useful strategies and importantly, four different ways of approaching the whole process. At this point, I would now like to open the conversation to our audience. Please feel free to put in your questions in the Q&A or in the chat, or raise a hand, and we can get a few questions before we go. So, okay, I see what seems like a question.
It looks like there's a hand raised too from Samuel Amwaping.
Okay, so then Samuel, could you unmute and go, and then I'll read a question I see here.
All right. Am I audible now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Lamte. So my question has to do with the teaching evaluations. If you're in the job market where, somehow there's a conversation about your teaching evaluation from your students, particularly one that did not really go in your favor. I mean, it's for being difficult for you to have taught for maybe 4 or 5 years and then have completely perfect teaching evaluation. So if a question comes up about, some sort of teaching evaluation that did not go in your favor, how do you handle that? Maybe a student made some sort of comments, or maybe the statistics do not show something that's they seem to expect. How do you handle that? How do you respond to that?
Yeah, so any of the panelists could take up.
Yeah. I want to say something about that. I think it's kind of this is a very challenging situation. Very, very challenging. I think there are two things here. One has to do with it depends on the culture of the department. So when you find a department and they term themselves as student-centered, you find one or two people who will make it a big deal. Yeah, they will definitely make it a big deal. Now, what you can do is to do what I call risk repair. So the risk repair is to kind of find a good way of trying to give, especially if you know the case. That's where I would say any student who makes a negative comment, you should be able to trace that particular, student. So when you teach, always observe like potential people who would give you bad feedback or bad evaluations. Constantly observe. And you can predict that through like grade, like when you grade, some of them complain, some of them, they even go to talk to your supervisors. Like these are like instances where you get to know the potential troublemakers. So now when that comes up, you do like risk repair. So the risk repair, try to explain the situation and try to neutralize that with other positive statements some students might have made along inside your evaluation. So when you do that, you kind of like neutralize the situation. Another way is to kind of, especially if you teach in a very predominantly white institution. I attended a predominantly white, institution. So mostly people like us, we get a lot of, bad evaluation, especially if you are Black or African. You get a lot of bad evaluation from students who might not like you, or students who genuinely they haven't been taught by a Black person. Now, go into the statistics. There are a lot of research done about how minority groups get bad evaluation. Draw from this. Actually, do not be intimidated. Draw from some of these things and highlight how people like you tend to get like some of these, evaluation, especially because of your background and then because of some of these things. So that's how you neutralize the whole thing. But other than that, it's just a very challenging situation. Honestly, it's a very challenging situation. But in a situation where you are interviewing with an R1 university, where they are more interested in your research, some of these things, when they come up, they have a different way of evaluating them. And some of them, right from the word go, they are able to tell that, okay, they are able to make a prediction. They are able to make like certain possible things that could have happened, why some of these things happen the way they happen. But you can't do anything other than risk repair. And you can only do that by evidence, and by also trying to kind of neutralize that with the positive, statements, some students have made in your evaluation.
I have a few things to add to that. I will just say that as a grad student, whenever you receive teaching evaluations, it's also a good idea to see what exactly students are saying about the classes. Any reasonable reader is able to tell what would seem to be prejudiced, statements from what might potentially just be sloppy work. And so if constantly students in your evaluation points to, well, this instructor doesn't return grades on time. If 10 students are talking about that, the chances that someone will read that as true is very, very likely high, right? And if that recurs over a long period, so, fall semester, same set of comments, spring semester, the same thing, summer semester, the same thing, then it is more difficult to then defend or reframe that kind of comments or set of comments from students. And even if that were the case, then what you could do is to take this up as a challenge. So in interviews, if someone were to bring it up, you can discuss this as, student feedback that has informed the way going forward you have approached the class, right? So if students complain about, well, this person is inaudible, or we can't understand whatever the person says, sometimes a reasonable person reading this would know that, again, okay, well, students are going to be prejudicial, right? Yeah, you're African. Sometimes you can be as audible as it gets. The student just chooses not to get you. People would understand that. But I guess what I'm trying to get at here would then be, if there is consistency over a long period, in different ways, different students raising the same set of, problems with your class, then it would be important to take a moment to reflect on what exactly the problem could be. Now, if there are one or two comments in my experience that seem like everyone gets, those, so I would assume that, everyone gets those kinds of comments. Sometimes you don't even see it coming. A student might talk about something entirely different. And people increasingly are coming to the realization that, yes, these are not particularly effective, teaching evaluations are not particularly effective tools for measuring, the success of a class, because it can be about popularity contest, right? Your students just like you, and so they got good grades in your class. Everything else is fine. So you should be sure that if students in your teaching evaluations are raising particular sets of problems that can be identified in other parts of your dossier as a whole, then it is probably not students, and that might be something that needs addressing going forward. Maybe there's, one or two comments here and there. I wouldn't bother much about it. Any faculty member who is going to be bringing that up over and again, like Maruf said, yes, you can deftly, draw on research that supports the fact that, yes, you did recognize, that there were these comments. Some do not accurately reflect what goes on in your class, but you have taken them up and, as in good faith, as student feedback to improve up in your class. You don't want to get into the blame game of, oh no, these were just, students who never got you, because again, that will also not come across very positively. But you want to come across as someone taking feedback, even if it seems, like unjustifiable.
Wonderful submission, sir. Thank you. So there's a question here, and I think the question has to do with more of the prior application process. So it's asking, how do you not end up in a very discriminatory or systemic injustice institution where your work may not be appreciated, you might have been you've been marginalized or so. So probably before applying, what do you do? How do you not end up in such a place that your work will not be valued?
I mean, I've been talking about teaching positions, so I don't know if I can answer to this, but just something little I have observed is you really have to read about the departments. You really have to read about them. For example, my department, the name is English and Comparative Literature. And they have both the writing studies program and TechCom rhetoric composition is under the writing studies program. Then they have literature, creative writing, film studies, and all of that. It tells you clearly that writing, the writing program is not a big part of the department. You can see clearly. And even if when you go to the faculty meeting, you realize that the lit people are the most people who talk, that they are the main people. Now I am seeing this because I'm in the department, but if you read about it and you look at the different divisions of the different units, you will know. So I remember there was this call, and I wanted to tell the colleague that yes, is a rhetoric person they are looking for, but I wanted to tell the person that these are the number of rhetoric people we have there, just about three. Most of the other rhetoric people are in the teaching program, but for tenure track, only about three people. So, you need to know it means that these are the colleagues, you're working with. For example, even the graduate students that come in, more of them are under lit and creative writing compared to, and this translates into department politics. about who to hire, even positions and who are leading positions and things like that. It means that when it comes to promotion, your tenure, committee probably will have a lot of lit people in there. Yes, they'll have like, because we have like three Redcom people, depending on what they are involved in, maybe two of them will be there because they want to be fair and evaluate you based on that. But definitely you have a list because they try to make sure that, people from other, um, you know, research interests and areas are on the committee and things like that. But it should give you a sense of what you are going into when you read the department. And for me, that was the first time I was going into a department that had the lit and the creative, aside being in Ghana and studying lit and communication, so you have to really, that's what I will add. And I know it's very surface level, and though my colleagues in the tenure track will have more to add to that. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I see Dr. Nate's hand up, so we'll hear briefly from you.
In addition to researching the department, as Ruby mentioned, what comes to my mind is to possibly find out if there is any staff member who shares a similar background with you. So since this is a DI question, if there's a staff member who is maybe black like you or has a similar identity as you, perhaps you can email this staff member before you apply and ask about the departmental, culture, or if the department has a way of, supporting people like yourself. So I think you can find that out. Now, if there is nobody who shares a similar background like you, which I think would be unusual because more often than not there would be at least a couple of people in that department, who have a similar background with you, then you can still take a chance and ask anybody at all in the department about their departmental culture that, well, this is who you are interested in applying for a position in their department, and you just want to find out, what the person thinks about how the department maybe treats people like you. There's no harm in trying. If you can't find somebody like you to ask, you can just ask anybody at all in the department, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I think I will take one more question if there's, I see one question from Dominic again. So Dominic is asking, what about um, recommendations or evaluations from colleagues, peers who are not professors? So if you have your colleagues who are a little bit ahead of your cohort, observe your class and write evaluations. Could you use them as a supporting material for your applications?
Um, is it the case that like they are requesting student evaluation? I'm not sure the question is clear. If they are requesting student evaluation, then it means that student evaluation is a more specific genre. Unlike maybe if you are also taking a recommendation from a colleague, say if part of your application dossier is to send out recommendation letters. So if you have colleagues who know your teaching and they can speak to your teaching, and if those people are giving you recommendation, that is also a separate thing. So from my understanding, if you want to like ask if it is student evaluation is more specific. If they are requesting student evaluation, they want, student evaluation. And some of them would be like very open to say that you can also send out evaluation by like any colleague. Some of them are kind of like very clear on that. But if you are also talking about recommendation, then recommendation mostly they come from either like your committee members or anybody at all who has taught you in their capacity as your professor or anybody who has worked with you. In that regard, you can draw some of these things from a peer or a cohort who can speak to your abilities. But largely, just take some of these things from people you trust, right? People you kind of like trust people who could speak to your abilities.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I shall see Dr. Nati's before Dr. Daglu will come in. Let's hear from Dr. Nati and then
Yeah, I think simply I'll say yes, because I think the person indicated that they want you to supplement teaching evaluations. So it means that they have the teaching evaluations and they want to use this also as maybe supplementary information. Then, yeah, I think that should be fine. Not in place of the teaching evaluation, because if an institution requests for teaching evaluations, then they mean teaching evaluations. But is this like an additional document you think you want to offer as some supplementary additional material? Then I think it shouldn't be a problem.
great. And pivot to Dr. Dadubla.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that actually because it's a supplement. I would say one final thing though about the recommendations to plan ahead about the kinds of people who will write you a recommendation like this. It is typical for folks to draw on their committee members, but you probably just took one course with someone and they are on your committee. They know a lot more about your research than about your teaching. So if you imagine that you will need someone to speak to your teaching, then you just like taking a pedagogy class where someone comes to a peer comes to your class and takes notes and then sends that to you later, or maintains that note in order to send to your for your applications much later. You can also invite someone you believe can write you a recommendation in the future to visit your class, observe your teaching, and write notes. So that much later, that person can be one of the people you can draw on to write your recommendation for the jobs you're applying to.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I do not see any questions now. I do not see any hands now raised. So I'll before we wrap up and come to the end of the webinar, I would like to thank our candidates, but also ask you, what is your final takeaway you want to leave us with? In terms of things you might not have asked or things you might not have missed, we might not have paid attention to. Your final takeaway as you wrap up, just in a minute.
I would say two things. First, I would highlight the importance of persevering in the job market. So generally, the academic landscape is a fiercely competitive, space, like most, job markets really. And so if you're a grad student or you've recently graduated or you've been in the market for a while and, it's not had a breakthrough yet, I would say, yeah, don't give up. Don't um, surrender, don't throw in the towel, keep persevering, keep applying yourself, keep preparing, keep learning, get people's insights and input. And just as, there's evidence of some people who have gotten the breakthrough, eventually, your opening is also going to come. So I think resilience, perseverance, being determined, on the market is extremely important. And then the final thing I would mention is that once you get a job, irrespective of which region or context or department, wherever you find yourself, I think adaptation is extremely important. So even though we've shared different experiences and different perspectives, once you find yourself in the job, you realize that, well, there are things you need to, adapt to. So you should be able to evolve. You should be able to, make changes when necessary, and you shouldn't be too steep, in your ways. Of course, you have your fundamental values and, principles, but it is extremely important that in whatever system you find yourself, you should be able to, adapt, evolve, and still be able to thrive within the system. So this will be my closing remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Nate. Could we hear your final take, Dr. Dadublo?
Yeah, I'll say that the process can be very, very challenging, especially when you're trying to, as early career scholars, graduate school students going on the job market, you're trying to finish your dissertation, write these materials. It can be very, very challenging. But at the same time, if you prepare ahead of time, if your department has a professional outcomes, a professional development class or seminar, make sure you take these. write the materials, get feedback on them, revise and revise and revise. I cannot, emphasize this enough, because any kind of system where people read a lot of materials, after a few minutes, it becomes, quite generic, right? So something that makes you stand out, but which is also really part of that genre, is important that you make sure your materials, through preparation, through editing, through feedback, reflects the best that you can send out there. And finally, just talk to people. Find a community that you can draw on for this kind of process, because you can be in your silo and then believe you're probably the only one doing it, right? People apply to tens of jobs, before finally even getting an interview. But just be sure that you are taking care of yourself.
Thank you, Dr. Daduglo. And then to Dr. Wadia, your final take.
Yes, thank you. Just like Dr. Dagduglo said, talk to people and be specific about the kind of help you want. For me, it was, I want to see a sample cover letter, please, I need it, and, the person was very generous to share. And so it's really helpful to look at a sample because, you're like, anyway, it's helpful. We all know that. And then the second tip is, so the first question about, how to avoid or handle, discrimination and things. That was a very important question. And, Mark, spoke about, asking around. And I also talk about really reading to check if the department values your research, because that can also add a layer of discrimination. But I would say that don't be afraid to test the waters. Don't be afraid. You could be the only first Black person there, Africa specifically, African person there, and, bringing onto the department. Don't be afraid to test the waters. You never know what may come out, from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wadia. And then finally to Dr. Maruf.
For me, I think you have to take things easy on yourself, because a lot of times it's just so hard, so hard. Every day you keep modifying cover letters, keep modifying your CV, keep modifying your teaching statements. So it gets extremely overwhelming. So you just have to take things very, very easy on yourself. And sometimes the interviews might not go well. Just be very calm and stabilize yourself, and then you just move on. Now, when offers are not coming, do not lose your cool. Do not, because the moment you lose your cool, you see that your brain gets shattered and you might not be able to proceed. And chances are that if you are writing your dissertation, that could also reflect on your dissertation. So if offers are not coming, you just take a step back and then maintain your cool. And one last thing, honestly, do not get discouraged, especially if you get into the job market for the first time and it doesn't happen. A lot of times it's not a votes against maybe whatever, like maybe something actually went wrong. Sometimes the job market, maybe it's not your market. So just go prepare and then come back another time. And a lot of times people get luck shine on them and then they make it. So you just have to take things very cool and take things one after the other and get a community that could also support you along the way. All things being equal, if you did your best, just leave the rest for nature to take its course. Yep.
Thank you, and thank you all. So soon, we are at the end of our webinar, and I will want to once again thank our 4 candidates for generously sharing their experiences, strategies, and lessons from the application process. I would also want to thank RDSG, that is the Rhetoric and Discourse Society of Ghana, for helping make this conversation possible. And of course, thank you all for joining us asking questions, and participating in this thoughtful program. I hope today's conversations has given some practical ideas for approaching your own applications and has also reminded us that there is no single formula for a successful application. Hearing different experiences can help us think more intentionally about our own strategies and choices. And I hope we make good use of that. So, on behalf of the Rhetoric and Discourse Society of Ghana, thank you again to our candidates and to everyone who participated today. We appreciate your time and hope you found the discussion useful. I would also encourage you to follow us on Facebook, Rhetoric and Discourse Society of Ghana, for updates and for more programs like this. Have a wonderful day and bye.
And thank you to our wonderful moderator. Yeah, this was well done. Thank you, Linford.
Yeah.
I echo those sentiments. Nice meeting all of you. Bye-bye.
Yeah.